Get ready for the Work Better podcast. I'm Toree McQueen, here to share stories on what's working and what's not in business and in life from humans all over the world. I believe everyone's version of success looks different, but in the end, we should all love our life's work, and in doing so, live a life of complete fulfillment. And if you don't love your work, I'm hoping you'll tune in and uncover some inspiration here to work better. Hey, my friends, I have been so eager to share with you guys this conversation that I've had with this special lady because so many of you have amazing, brilliant ideas and you have visions from going from nothing to something. Or maybe you already have a successful business right now, but are getting stuck trying to figure out how to scale and what's the next thing to do to be able to move the needle in your business. Because maybe you just don't have the expertise or the know to know what to do next. So, this is going to probably give you several aha moments. So, you're going to want to listen up closely to this conversation that I have with Jenny. She is a business operations consultant that her clients also refer to her as their in-house COO, the integrator to their visionary, and even their business therapist. Jenny has spent over 8 years in various corporate functions from finance, supply chain management, operations, and product marketing, and has acquired deep insights into the inner workings of successful Fortune 500 companies. With her wealth of corporate experience, Jenny now leverages her expertise in streamlined systems, data-driven decision-making, and strategic planning to transform founders and small business owners from scattered and overwhelmed to focused, profitable, and balanced. You guys, you're going to want to buckle up as I introduce you to Jenny Jones. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Toree. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm eager to chat with you about all things that you have in your corner of expertise, but also your journey on how you got there, but the whole, you know, thing about being an implementer to the visionary is
Mhm.
really fascinating because I think it's such a hard role to fill. So, before we dive into all that, why don't you share with everybody what you do and your journey leading up to where you are now?
All right, sure. So, yes, I love being the integrator, implementer to the visionaries. Like, I feel like that's kind of the balance to like my personality. But basically, what I do as a business operations manager slash consultant, I I just kind of help you streamline the back end of your business through systems, refining your workflows, looking at your data to help you make data driven decisions, and strategically planning out what we're actually doing. And I've really found that this niche is kind of what I just love doing because I love helping people. And I feel like I've always been really great at just finding a way to organize things no matter what, like whether it's in life or in business, wherever it is, I'm always like, there must be a better way to do this, right? That's kind of always how my brain is working.
Right.
I hate inefficiencies.
You sound like me, except for my poor team. I'm always like, yes, and then this, that's that. We got to do this, that, and that. So they're like reprioritizing. They're like the you role that deals with all of my crazy.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'd balance you out, don't worry. But, yeah, yes, I definitely am the one that gets thrown, like, all the things that are going wrong, whatever it is in my clients' business, and I'm just like, "Okay, let's pause, let's take a step back and figure out what is the root cause." Like, okay, this is like a symptom, right, of whatever you're bringing to me as an issue. Let's figure out the root cause, so that's why they also call me their business therapist, and which I always thought was funny. Like, a few clients started calling me that, and I was like, "Yeah, that fits. I am your business therapist."
That's so funny. Okay. And okay, how did you start here? Start doing this? Because obviously, like, there's no job description out of college that says when I grow up I want to be an operations person. Like,
Yeah.
how did you get here?
Yeah, so after I graduated college, I started in finance because that was what I got my degree in. I literally had 0 idea what I wanted to do with my life, so I was just like, "This is
For
safe,
everybody, I feel
right?"
like.
Yeah, yeah, I was just like, "I'll figure it out." But I started in finance, and that was like a great role for me to start in because I just got to see from a financial perspective how businesses operate and how the C suite is using data to make decisions to drive, like,
Mhm.
to feed it down to everybody in the organization, right? They're like,
Yeah.
all right, this is what the numbers are telling us, and this is what I want you guys to do now based on what goals we want to set. And, in the finance seat, I was like, okay, these are great skills to have, but I don't really feel like I'm actually doing anything. I'm just like, here are the numbers. So this is what I think we should be doing, but I wasn't doing anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And I like to feel like I'm doing something, especially I'm like, I have to do this every day. So that's when I did pivot into operations and supply chain management. And that was really where I found like, okay, this is great. Like every day I am making all these decisions that are impacting like millions of dollars. Like I can press a button and this is going to impact the way, sales are being driven for a specific customer, like all the way down the line into next year or something. Like I felt like being in that ops role really felt like I was making an impact to the bottom line. And then I then got a promotion into a product marketing manager. So that was just more like project management, people management. But I got really burnt out in corporate. So I quit my job and it was right before the pandemic. So
Mhm.
my idea was to just take a mental health break and go back into corporate. But then the pandemic happened, so I was like, "Okay, let's pivot maybe." And my husband, he actually has his own business. He has an electrical contracting business. So I was like, "Hey, I guess I can like kind of help you with some of the back end tasks, right?" Like, he's out in the field. He needs somebody to help with the systems and the organization, right? So that was kind of how I got my start because I realized, oh, there are obviously other small businesses, not,
Yeah.
like my husband, but I can
Totally.
use these skills that I have. And that's when I was like, oh, I'm assuming I'll have to figure out how to pivot into the online space. But that was kind of how I got into where I am today. It was just very lucky that everything happened the way it did.
Well, and I think that is so fascinating. You coming from finance, I think gives a really good perspective because many times the finances is what matters most, right? The profit at the end of the day.
Yes.
But like you saying, not being able to have the ability to make a change that reflects the profit would be such a tough role, right? To be like, "Hey, this is what you're doing, but, like, you keep doing this," or, "If you just did it this way, it would be easier," you'd make double. I think that that's such an interesting perspective. Now, so you got burnt out with corporate. I don't think you're the only one. The pandemic really shifted, I think, a lot of people's perspectives on what they wanted in life and gave everybody that rest they needed, but also force them to think differently and outside the box. So you take me back. You started working with your husband's business and you kind of took on a role. Did they hire you or were you just kind of like, let me just see what I can do? And then kind of went
I
from there.
yeah, I was literally like, let me just see what I can do. I mean, for like tax purposes, we're like, hey, let's just like have you hired on as an assistant or whatever. And I
Right.
was like, okay, sure, let's just figure it out. And I was essentially kind of like an executive assistant, like the catch
Uh-huh.
all for all
Yeah.
the things that he couldn't figure out or he didn't have the
Yep.
time to do. And so that was kind of how I was like, okay, there obviously needs to be better. Like, I actually had never started working with a business from the ground up before. I always like, from corporate, you're
Yeah.
thrown in, they already
All the
have ways
systems
that they
are in
do
place.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything's already set up for you, and you just kind of go with the flow of however they were doing it and tweak it along the way. But this was a different way for me to think about how can I optimize the way that we run the back end of the office. And so that was like a real learning curve for me, honestly. Like,
Sure.
I mean, yes, I feel like I'm a pretty organized person, but to have to pivot my thinking and do it from the ground up, it was a
Yeah.
different way of approaching it. And I know it's very I
Organized.
it's
That's why.
yeah.
It's not organized at all. You have to like figure it out.
Yes, and, like, having to ask my husband, like, "Hey, so what is your process for working with this client? Like, how do you know when to send them a proposal, or how do you know when you're supposed to do
Uh-huh.
this thing in the process?" So, it was me trying to figure out the different processes that are happening in the business, like, these were all kind of terms and things that I wasn't really aware of, but I was just like, "Let's figure it out," and then I kind of realized there has to be more structure into how everything is run. Yeah.
Yes. Well, you have to organize it all. And the thing is too, I don't know what your husband is like, but you almost have to pull it out of him. Like they're
Oh,
like,
yes.
"Oh, no, it's real simple. You just do blah 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 blah." And you're like, "Yeah, but
I
let's
know.
break that down a second. Like what do you actually do and why do you do it so that we can get this on paper?" Which
Yes,
I'm sure your husband's like, "You're overcomplicating this." When really you're just creating a process.
yeah, that is exactly it, honestly, which is really funny. He's very much like he is a classic visionary, and he holds everything in his head, and he will just, like, spit all this stuff out at me, and I'm like, "Wait, hold on, I don't know what that means or what all this is step by
Uh-huh.
step, like, let's slow down." So
It's so funny. I've dealt with that personally in my business too. And it's like, you think, and then someone like you comes in and you think, okay, it's just easier if I just do it myself. But the thing is, you are the true hero in translating what is going on in our brains into a system so we can scale. Because without you and your skill set, the company cannot scale. I know that us visionaries think that we can, but we can't. Like, there's no way any
sure.
it'll come with a lot of people coming on and then being flustered and confused and, like, whiplash, right? Without that middle piece of organization, and that they'll get burnt out and then they'll leave, and, I've experienced that with staff members. I've had to get more organized. I've had to have an operations person come in and make everything more streamlined even though I thought it was already streamlined. So it's really interesting you chatting about that because I think it's highly undervalued or overlooked, I should say, in our world, especially with entrepreneurs in our creative space. I think the solopreneur, that's what's missing in a lot of businesses.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I love I love that you're, like, shining the spotlight on me because, yes, I do feel like the upside is definitely like, you kinda think about it last, honestly, and I get it. It's more important in the beginning to think about selling and how you're marketing and growing your business because how else are you gonna actually have a business,
Mhm.
right? Like, that is I get it. That has to be priority, but obviously the way that work with your clients, like, you gotta have systems in place for that or else like you said you're going to run into a wall and it's just going to mean burnout for you for your team because nobody knows what they're doing. It's just a little chaotic.
Well, and it's not just for you. I think it's for like you as a visionary, I feel like you don't feel it as much, right? Because you can just keep rolling, but it is the team. I
Mhm.
think that you can't build a team unless you have it structured in a way that makes sense for people to actually get work done,
Oh
right?
yes, 100%.
In a
Yeah.
streamlined way. It's so great. Okay, so I want to hear even more. Okay, so let's keep unpacking this. Okay, so you worked with your husband, you kind of were like, "Let me just be on payroll and just see how this thing is run." And then you're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, we could totally turn this baby around and organize it and structure it and scale it." So like what once you did that for his company, did you just think like, "Okay, I could do this for other companies now?" Or were you like, "Okay, I'm done with your company. I'm more bored of that. I want to go to others?" Or tell me your story from there.
Yeah. So my thought process was, okay, I think I can do this for other companies because I was like, yeah, like I love being able to help you, but I also want something that's my thing, right? I want to have my
Mhm.
own thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I knew I wanted to start a business, and then I was like, okay, yeah, I can also add on other clients and kind of do the same thing for them. And that was where my thought process was. I didn't really know who needs an ops manager versus like virtual assistant. So my mind was like, okay, virtual assistant, maybe that's like my stepping stone into getting additional clients. But then I kind of realized like, oh no, I don't have to start there. I can
Oh,
I don't really have those
girl.
skills. Yeah. I know. I was underselling myself in the beginning. I wasn't very confident in that. But then
Well, I
yes.
think you're also learning, like, what people need. I think, again, in our world, in our space, and a lot of female entrepreneurs that I've talked to and that I know in my circle, their first instincts are to hire a virtual assistant. That's what they think they need. And in reality, I do feel like that bigger difference in scaling is a higher level operations person. Yeah,
Yeah.
that then has the admin. The operations person manages the admin is really how I see it, and maybe I'm wrong in that.
No, I mean, I think you're right because I think you really do need that more higher level ops person to kind of take your vision and know what you want to do and translate it to the team. And so that you don't have to be the micromanager. Somebody else is being that buffer for you and you can do even more with your time, right? That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. So this is really necessary, and now you're online and you figured out I don't have to be a virtual admin. I could actually do my skill set and put it into the workforce. So how's that for you now?
Yeah. So I work currently like in, full service ops management. And then I also have services like from the DIY side too, just like, audits, intensives, that kind of thing. But I really enjoy just, you know, I feel like the thread in all anything that I do with all my clients is just helping them run their businesses more efficiently and more effectively, helping them figure out how to delegate more effectively, how to make things run more efficiently. So I don't know, that's just like kind of what I'm doing every day with my clients. And it does bring me a lot of joy. I feel like I'm just smiling thinking about
Right? So you don't
it.
miss corporate at all.
No, no, not at all. I love having the ability to structure my days however I want. And I feel like that's like a whole systems conversation in itself, right? Like balancing, your personal life with your business, right? And that was honestly a challenge for me in the beginning, but I love having that freedom to kind of set my schedule, work with who I want to, and it really has brought me so much more joy in my life.
Oh, good. That's so good to hear. I love it when people find what they enjoy and then they find their own work within that. Like how they can add value where they also find joy. I think that that's like the golden ticket for anybody out there. Okay, so let's say you have companies that you work with. I mean, do you have like a bread and butter of like employee count or like who you typically work with? And what would you say their biggest issues are when they bring you on?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think the typical like bigger clients, they have a team of at least like it can be like 3 to 10 people, like in that kind of range and they're definitely multiple six figures, like they're really growing rapidly. And it's always I'm working directly with the founders and they are coming to me with problems like you know, things just aren't running really smoothly. Balls are getting dropped. I have a team, but it still feels difficult to just find balance in my work
Mhm.
life. Like, I get it as like a founder of a really big growing business. It's your baby, and they feel very invested in how it is running, and so they really tie themselves to the performance of their business and how their team is doing and they find themselves micromanaging everything and they're essentially the bottleneck. And
Yes.
I am trying to extract them out of that bottleneck role and getting them to be in that place of just doing the work that they want to do as the founder slash CEO, whatever they want to call themselves, but sticking to the things that they want to do and being that visionary and knowing where they are driving their business next year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, whatever vision that they have and focusing on that instead of like the little email from a random client to their admin and the admin's like, "How do I answer this?" That's not super, super important,
Oh
right? Like,
gosh, yeah.
like, that's not
I
something you.
think it is because it's your reputation, right? And you're like, "Oh, I gotta make sure they answer it correctly," but really, oh,
Yeah.
man, and that is the difference between a virtual assistant, I think, and actual, like, higher level thinkers. They really take on that ownership as
Yes, I
opposed to, like, a
exactly.
virtual assistant just is like, "Tell me what you need me to do, and I'll do it." Where,
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, you need the people who are going to do things for you because they take on that load, but you do need somebody who is gonna have that directive and guidance to say, like, these are the expectations, these are the guidelines, and you wanna be able to give them ownership to do things without coming to you to make a decision for
Mhm.
every single question that they have, right? Like, you wanna be able to get to a place where you can empower your team with the resources and like the values of your business and how you operate, the vision of your business. You want to feed all that into the decisions that you want your team to make on your behalf. And because they are going to be like client facing, public facing for you. And they're like you said, they are a reflection of you as the founder. And I think it is really important to kind of create that culture so that your team is empowered to make decisions on your behalf.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh, that's so good. And I noticed the book behind you, Traction.
Yes.
Is that the system that you mostly, like, work from, would you say?
No, I definitely definitely wouldn't say it's definitely like a resource, like, I love to, like,
Okay.
read business books and incorporate everything that I do learn into, how I
Into your own systems, but
yeah,
okay. Because I
yeah.
also have you read Rocket Fuel?
I think I have it on my bookshelf, but I think I haven't read it yet. Yeah.
Okay, so Rocket Fuel's a good one too from Gino Wickman, that kinda goes over the, visionary versus the implementer or the integrator roles. So I was just curious if you have read any of that yet, but it's just
I
interesting. So you did mention that the visionaries are typically the bottlenecks, right?
Mhm.
Until
Yes.
they get somebody who can take on that role. Why do you think it's so hard for I mean, would you say that's the most common thing? And then would you say what do you think it is that is so hard for them to get to that next level?
I think it's just I just think it's difficult to let go. I mean, when you're building a business, I think it's just hard to trust that somebody else can own what you do and do something just as well as you do it or better than you. And I totally get it. It's something that I struggle with too. It's not easy. Like delegation is not an easy skill. And I think that is always like what it comes down to. I mean, my clients it's like they've gotten to a point where they've obviously built a team and they have delegated, but it's like they got to let go even more. I think it's just that next step of being like, I gotta really, really trust my team. I have to really trust that they know what they are doing. They know what I want them to be doing. And I think it's just this mindset kind of thing that I think is the biggest piece that I see that I kind of have to step in as a business therapist to
Right.
be like coaching my clients to be like, it's
Yes.
okay. You did so much. Look at all the things that your team is doing. You can trust them. Like, it's just taking that step of being like, okay, here's like one thing that you're doing now. Let's like let them own it and see how it goes. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question, but I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
it's
No, it
the
is
mindset.
helpful to hear that. I believe mindset's like huge for any issue that you have. Majority of the time, it all boils down to mindset. Would you say there's a huge distinction between being a virtual COO versus like being internal? Like, does anybody have issues with that? Or have you, like, what would you say the biggest pro or con is to being virtual versus being internal with one team?
Yeah, I think it really there is like pros and cons to both. And like, for me, I like being that kind of fractional kind of role. Um, just because most of my clients, like the team is able to keep things running and I'm able to step in, not 9 hours, whatever, 8 hours every day full time to like make sure things are running smoothly. And I think the difference is that in a full time role, there's just like more, there are just maybe more pieces going on. Like maybe there's just like lots of different projects and things launching, and you just have a bigger team, you have more needs. Maybe you also want to be building some kind of HR-ish, like team-ish culture thing
Right.
that you want this ops person to also oversee. So I think it kind of gets into like how big is your team? What are the needs of your organization? Like
Mhm.
where are you taking your business? Because I think to bring it in-house, like it is very pricey, I think, to like bring in some kind of full-time ops role. And I think you really have to be at a certain revenue point, team size, whatever it
Yeah.
is, to really have that make sense. And I think for a lot of people, as they're growing in the multiple six figures, like totally fine to have a fractional role. But then I think, 7 figures plus, you probably need somebody full time in house. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, you might even be able to get by with a fractional role for some time, but I think again, you're going to have to evaluate where your team is and kind of what the culture is like, what your needs are to kind of make that decision. So kind of vague, but I think it really comes down
Yeah,
to
that makes
the
sense.
dollars.
No,
Yeah.
it does make sense, and, you know, the thought that before, I think old school thinking would say that there are no fractional COOs, right? Back then. But now so many people are in the online space and making money there and doing all kinds of different launches and projects and working with different clients and pivoting and creating their own business out of nothing. So I think that it really, really holds that position, as a viable option for those people, right? Because
Mhm.
now they have that option to have a fractional COO, whereas before it kind of didn't really exist as much. I don't think, anyways. Hey there, friends. Are you in business and wanting to get more clients over the next 6 weeks? Well, I've got something just for you, the 5831 Method Session and Guide. It's all about simplifying your strategy to attract and close those dream clients. No more guesswork. Think of this as a little one on one session with me to figure out the exact strategies to gain those next clients to close. When you jump on board, you'll snag a downloadable guide and step by step video session with yours truly, so we can tailor this method to fit your unique business and goals. And imagine this, in just under an hour session, you'll have a custom roadmap ready to roll out over the next 6 weeks. So what are you waiting for? No matter what business you're in, head on over to toreemcqueen.com/method. That's toreemcqueen.com/method, or find the link in the show notes to get more clients today. And what would you say are the biggest signs people should look for if they are they have a business and they're looking to grow? How do they know that they're ready for an operations manager?
Yeah, I think this is always a good question. And I would say again, it's going to come down to the revenue. A lot of times, like what are you bringing in? Do you have a big enough business where it makes sense to have somebody running the day to day?
What comes first, the
No.
chicken or the
Like,
egg?
yeah. I mean, that's a question, right? That's what everybody wants to know. Um, but I think you also have to think about how big is your team and what are they handling right now for you that needs to be taken further off of your plate. Like, if your team already is helping you with all the client work, all the admin stuff, maybe you have a sales team, maybe you have other people doing the marketing for you. It's like that's when it gets kind of big, right? You have 5 plus people that are coming to you with questions and they need management. And I think that's when you need somebody to be that buffer. It's like when you've delegated enough and then you're like, wait, now I am just managing all these people and my day is spent answering Slack messages, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's
I
when
think
you
we
need
got
somebody.
fear of some of us entrepreneurs is like, oh, I don't want to manage anybody. You know,
Yes,
I
exactly.
felt that before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a big pain point. Yes, I think when you feel like your time is really spent answering a million Slack questions, a lot of emails going back and forth, and it feels like things are getting lost in the shuffle, and you can't keep track of who's doing what, and people are asking questions left, right, and center. that is when you definitely need someone to be that buffer, and they can be that person to direct what actually needs to go to you, right? And they can say like, "No, I can answer this," or "I can direct you on how to answer this email or complete this task," without us having to loop in the founder, right? Like, this is not a big picture activity.
Yeah,
You
no.
need to keep exactly. Like, we want to, I think when you need somebody to be that buffer for you and stop people from approaching you all the time. I mean, you don't want to be unapproachable to your team, right? But
Well, of course, yeah, but
yeah.
you have to bring in, a lot of times the front runner is the main revenue generator initially, right? So
Mhm.
the what happens is, and what I've heard from teams is, if they start hiring a team and they start doing that, they start losing production, or they start losing. I mean, I'm in the real estate space also, so I have a real estate team and also another business, but you do see it in real estate as well as the other businesses. Like, the second the main producer and the revenue generator starts growing and they start building their teams, then they start losing production also, because they're in the weeds. Right?
Mhm.
They're in the weeds of their business, and they are trying to keep their people and build a culture and do these things, and that means every moment that they're in meetings doing those things and engaging with their staff, they are no longer like out producing money, right? They're
Yes.
not getting
Mhm.
revenues, they're not working on new products. Like, it's just interesting how that is. So it does sound like the operational role is very key to anybody who's in growth mode.
Yes, exactly. I think it really comes down to that operational role, being that buffer and allowing you to continue to focus on those revenue generating activities, because only the founder slash CEO, whoever it is, can really say, "Hey, I want to launch a new product or a new service," right? Like, they're the only one that can tell the team, tell the business that that is their idea, their goal. And they're not going to have the space to do that if they're in the weeds, like you said.
Yes, yes. Or they'll drop the ball on all of them, and stuff doesn't get done, and then team stops trusting, and then they stop trusting, and it just ends up getting nowhere, which I've been there too. So I get
Yes,
that.
I've
Yeah.
been there too.
Well, what would you say the top 3 things that your bread and butter is, that you really think are the main things that attribute to the success of companies with your role?
I think it comes down to building a team that you can trust, and, just creating a team that everybody works in sync and you can trust them, they trust you, and everybody understands their roles and responsibilities. I think that is like a big thing. Second, obviously, systems, processes, like you got to have that stuff documented. I haven't mentioned it yet, but SOPs, or standard operating procedures,
Oh my
like,
gosh, yeah.
huge thing. Yes. I mean, this is like a whole, like, like a whole big conversation. But like, when you are building your team, you do need these things called SOPs. I think it's something that is often overlooked. And oftentimes when I'm working with clients, I'm like, "Hey, do you have an SOP on this?" "No, I don't." Okay,
Oh
just
gosh,
let's just
okay.
let's just yeah, let's just at least record a Loom video, at least
Oh, I
something
use
so we can,
Loom.
yeah.
My
Oh,
team,
yes.
yeah. Loom is magic, and
Yes.
literally, the hard part now is, like, if you in that building phase, it's interesting because you chatted about, like, okay, I've been in corporate where everything's kind of already set, right? So then you're just shifting as you go. Whereas when you're in growth mode, like, I don't know if you've dealt with this, but as you're growing, you're creating SOPs, and then you drop a system, and then you have to redo all your SOPs, and then you buy another system, and then it adds to your efficiency, but then more SOPs. Like, the SOPs are so important, but I will say, like, as a visionary myself, when I've had to do the SOPs, I'm like, "Oh my god, and we have to do a new one. Is this a new one or an old one, or are we deleting this officially, or we may go back to it based on certain things?"
I
Can
get
you
it.
relate at all? Because these
I get
SOPs.
it. I get it. They're definitely tedious. I completely understand it. It's just like a necessary evil. I I tell my clients, like, I get that you hate doing this, but it's got to get done if you want your team to be able to, do things the
Yes.
right way instead of you being like, you did this wrong. Right.
And be resourceful. And be
Yeah.
resourceful, right?
Yeah.
Well, for anybody who doesn't know what an SOP is, let's dive into that briefly. I know you said this a whole nother can, and I'm going to open it
Let's do it.
and just chat about, okay, what the heck is an SOP? Let's hear it.
Okay. SOPs are short for standard operating procedures. And I know it sounds super corporate-y. Don't be intimidated. It's literally just like a how to, right? It's just like, how do you do this specific task? How do you do this specific process? That's essentially all it is. And I always tell my clients to make it less intimidating, just like record a Loom video. And
Mhm.
at least we have a video of you talking over how to do a specific thing, what resources they need to complete a task, whatever it is. And then you can delegate it to your virtual assistant to be like, hey, let's take this transcription and spit it into like chat GPT and start creating like a real detailed, like step-by-step procedure of how to do it from the very beginning all the way to the end of the process and include screenshots, whatever it is. I know. So tedious. It's like, who's going to be looking at this, right? Like, we all know how to do this, but you never know who's going to leave your team one day without notice. And you're going to be so grateful that you have an SOP because somebody knows how to do that process now instead of being like, oh my gosh, they were the only one that knew how to do it. I have no idea how to do it, and you're just left scrambling. But
Oh my
the
god.
SOPs will cover your butt.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mhm. Do you find that when people come to you, how likely is it that they already have SOPs?
I will say it's funny because I feel like people will be like, "Oh, Jenny, I have SOPs," and they'll have like 2 Loom videos or something, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's a good
And
start."
they'll be running 6 or 7-figure businesses, and they're like,
Yes.
"I don't have an SOP yet."
Yeah.
I just wanna
Yes.
let everybody know, like, don't be intimidated by the fact that you don't have SOPs. Just find somebody who can help you get them done because it is important. And there are companies, whether you make, $10,000 a month or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, that may or may not have SOPs just like you. So, right? Is that right?
Yes, you exactly. It is exactly right. You will be
Yes.
surprised. I mean, I get it. A lot of like my clients, they're like I said, they're visionaries and they're not going to care about the step by step of writing something out. They're going to be like, I know how to do it. It's in my head. But, you know, to really trust and delegate a team that can take care of that stuff for you without asking you questions and they can get stuff done on their own. They're independent. I
Yeah.
have their yeah.
How do you here's a golden question for you. How do you nail down a visionary long enough to get the process out of them?
It's like a one at a time thing. It's like, because I will have like my weekly calls and as I'm like going through the day to day and figuring out what needs to be documented, what needs to be refined, I'm going to be just like asking the questions like, okay, so we talked about this process, but I'm unclear on this step. Walk me through it. And I'm literally just like, and then what? And then what? That's all it
Yeah.
is. I'm just asking them to feed it to me because it's like jumbled in their head, but I kind of
Right.
pull it out in a sequential order for them.
Yes. And then what? And then
And
what?
then what
And they're like, I
happens?
don't know
Exactly.
this. I'm like, well, how though? Like,
Yeah.
how does that get from here to here though? Oh,
Yeah.
like, sometimes it's piece of paper, sometimes it's automatic, sometimes it's majority of it can be automatic nowadays, which I think it's funny because I do talk to a lot of business owners also that do so much manually. And then when you get into the weeds of their SOPs and like how they're actually doing it and how their teams are doing it, that's where the magic happens too. Because you could take their SOPs and be like, dude, let me save you 10 hours because this one system can automatically replicate what you just did here into wherever it needs to go in an organized way where we can pull reports and then da, we're done.
Oh my gosh. That's like one of my favorite parts.
Are you?
Honestly. Yes. Like when I work with clients and they're like, oh yeah, I've been doing it this way. And I'm like, okay, so we got the step by step. And then I'm
Awesome.
like,
It's
hold on.
working
How
great. Yeah.
yeah, yes. And then they're like, oh, but I spend 10 hours a week on doing this task. Like, one of my one of my old clients, she was what was she doing? She was manually sending out emails to specific people on just like Gmail, just like through her email, and she
Mhm.
wasn't utilizing like her active campaign. And I was like, "Hey, did you know if when we have somebody who buys this, we can automatically drop them into your active campaign with the specific tag, and all you have to do is just email people with only that tag." And she's like, "You save me 10 hours a week." 'Cause she was, like, manually pulling things. I don't
And
know.
now we're getting you an email from one.
Exactly. And it was just, like, little things. Like, once you see what you're doing manually, then you're like, "Oh, this is what you can actually automate," right? So, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the big things that's first you gotta actually pull out your step by step. Then
Yeah.
that's where you can integrate the automations and the technology. So, don't try to do it backwards is what I advise.
What do you mean by that? Wait. Do
Like, people want to start with the fancy tech or the software, but they don't have the process mapped out, and
right.
I want you
Okay.
to, like, kind of integrate the tech and the automations with the process that you have, so if
And
you can
that's
find.
such good
Mhm.
advice. I think that's great advice because for someone like me, I have a little bit of a tech background, so my brain goes instantly to like the tech because I already know it can be done. So my brain kind of gets snobby and I'm like, no. And so then I'm spending money on these systems, right? And my team doesn't fully understand the reason behind it, right?
Mhm.
And then it takes some practice to implement it. But I think that's so overlooked, or at least like something that people should know is like you don't need to have some fancy system. You can actually have your system be completely like paper, like a paper trail. And once you get that down and fully understand it and fully implement it, then it's so much easier for you to go back in and be like, okay, great. Now instead of this paper doc, we do a virtual doc, or we do DocuSign, or we go ahead and do a form and do it that way, and client data never touches a file folder. I think that's such a good thing to keep in mind.
Yes, I because not everybody is blessed with having a tech mind like you, and I feel like what I see happen is people will get that shiny object syndrome with like, "I need this
Mhm.
fancy tech thing," but they are not very tech savvy, and it overwhelms them, and they're just
The
left with the
learning
really.
curve itself.
Yeah, mhm.
Yeah, and then
You don't.
the tech itself has its own SOPs and its own training, and that is you almost need a tech person for that if your team isn't enough tech savvy, which again will
Exactly.
cost you more money. So it's better to just start out simple and then kind of scale from there, it sounds like.
Yeah, I agree.
Ah, okay. Oh my gosh. So many good things. Question, how do you balance your business with all your clients and your life? What does your daily schedule look like?
So, I created a system for how my day. I
Okay.
mean, how apt, right, as a systems person. I Because what I found when I first started was I just, like, got very overwhelmed with the Slacks, the emails, and, like, the client stuff and my stuff.
Oh,
It's full. I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh my gosh," and I'm at home, so there's, like, home things that I'm thinking about. So I'm like, "Okay, I really gotta I gotta, talk the
Yeah.
talk." I'm a systems person. Let's put a system into how I am splitting up my work. So this is actually something that I like to do with my clients if they aren't doing it kind of already or they
Mhm.
don't have a good system in place for them. But I like to theme my days of the week for like certain types of activities. So Mondays and Wednesdays are my heavy client work days. So I'm not really taking calls on those.
Yeah.
I try not to.
That's kinda what I do.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and I find that it just helps so much with your day. You just like know exactly, what you're going to be heading into that day. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I kind of like to have calls on that day, whether it's a podcast interview or a sales call or client calls, whatever it is. Those are the days I try to keep calls on. So, like my people facing days, right?
Okay.
And Fridays are the days I typically work on just my business. And I feel like having those kinds of days structured really helps me with balancing my business and my home life.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's super helpful, and I do something pretty similar to that, because I do have the podcast, I do have my team, I do have my business, and definitely still working in the business on some of the things, and you do have to make time for on the business. And my brain goes faster than what my actual like work gets done. So it is something where it's like, okay, if I don't stay organized like that, then nothing really gets done. Right. Because I'm just constantly in different projects and it just is like not good. So structuring
Yeah.
it how you have it has been working for me. So that's good.
I love to hear that.
Yeah. Where do you see yourself in your business 5 years from now?
Honestly, I don't know.
Right.
And yeah, because I I would say I know I want some bigger like community element and I don't know what that is gonna be like, whether it's a podcast or some membership, whatever it is, I know that I do want to build some kind of community like that. But again, just ideas. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
it's gonna look like in 5 years.
Yes. No, and I appreciate your honesty with that. And I think they say you underestimate, they overestimate what you can do in a year, but underestimate what you can do in like 10, like 5. So you just never know. And you might change your mind and follow, but
Yeah.
following your passion, I think, is what's
Yeah,
key.
exactly. I honestly try not to plan things too far out just because I mean thinking about where I was like, a few years ago,
You
I didn't
wouldn't,
know I was going
yes.
to be here. So yeah, I try not to really heavily plan what the 10-year plan is going to be.
Uh-huh. You know what? I think the pandemic did that to a lot of people too. I think the pandemic really shifted people's minds to like what's possible and then to just
Yeah.
kind of go with what they can go with at the time and
Yeah.
what is given to them. And I think it's made us scrappy again. Like it's made
Yes.
everybody just a little bit more okay with the figuring it out, because
Yeah.
you have to.
Exactly. I fully support just like figuring it out on the fly. I think I wouldn't be here where I was. Like I know you wouldn't be where you are today without just you just have an opportunity given to you and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna chase this and figure it out as I go.
Well, I appreciate you sharing with us everything today. I definitely think there are a lot of things that you gave us that maybe somebody knows, like, oh, this is your sign to start working better. If you're drowning in your tasks or trying to build a team and it's not working, or if you're ready to scale, but you're scared to manage everybody because that's just not your zone of genius, it might be your time to get an operations person. And I think like I said, a lot of people go to the virtual assistant first or they take those little baby steps. I think because it does have to do with financials. But I do think if people just took that little bit bigger leap to have a higher skill set role, then it would alleviate a lot of pressure from people. Because I think when you do get a virtual assistant, sometimes you're having to teach them things that you don't know yet or teach them that role as opposed to getting somebody who's already skilled in the role.
I
So
agree. Yeah.
I think it's
Mhm.
great. Awesome. Well, where can people find you and
Yes. So
how can they learn more if they want to reach out to you?
yeah, so you can connect with me on Instagram at Jenny M as in Mary Jones with a little underscore on the end. I'm pretty active on Instagram. Also active on LinkedIn if you can find me there at Jenny Jones. And you can find me on my website at jennymjones.com. You can learn more about me, my services. I got a few freebies on there for you guys about systems and SOPs if you want to check out.
All the fun
Yeah,
stuff.
yes, all the good stuff. So check it out there on my resources page. Otherwise, just yeah, send me a DM, shoot me an email. I'm happy to chat.
Thank you so much, Jenny. So good to chat with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Tori.
Well, my friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Work Better podcast. I hope you've wrapped up your golden nugget and take it with you on your journey to finish out the week. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, leave a review, or reach out to me personally if you have any special requests for guests or questions you'd like me to share on the show. In the meantime, I'll be over here rooting for you. Until next time.